And when and if something does happen, I'm ready. It's not a surprise and a shock. It is business as usual. They would never know that something went horribly wrong.
I
Uh,
love that bing went off. That was- Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. In the show, my guests and I explore how we can use creativity to do our best work and live our best lives. I talk with authors, musicians, actors, scientists, and others who are all pushing the envelope to live fully, creatively, and authentically. Listen in to get the scoop on how you can do it too. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the show. I'm also incredibly thrilled with today's guest. Check this out. Since 1973, Brian Glow has performed his award-winning concert one-man comedy magic and mind-reading productions and all his incredible full-scale illusion concerts internationally for casinos, television, film, corporate events, and extravagant public spectacles all over the world. So he's got a one-man show, but he also has one of the largest touring illusion concerts in North America. He is an international illusionist and a comedy magician. Brian creates an unbelievable magical experience that's guaranteed to amaze and amuse everyone in his audience. Everything I've ever seen him do has been incredible. And he's toured in over 45 countries all over the world. So you can see why I'm super excited to have him here. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hello, Isolde. I am so happy to be here.
I can't believe that we've been talking about doing this and having you on the show for like 2 years. So it's very exciting that you've finally got you here.
This is for lack of trying. Just 10 months a year on the road is stressful enough.
Yeah, and it's not like you're, sitting around eating bonbons even right now. Before we started recording this, we were talking about some of the things Brian is some of the balls Brian is keeping up in the air, and it's more than any three people put together. So there you go. But I want to start, if it's okay with you, by going back to the beginning, because as you know, this show is all about how creative people use that creative mindset to do their best work and live their best lives. And it's my way of trying to encourage someone who might want to be more creative in their life to start. And so I want to get to those juicy parts from the beginning of your journey, and I'd love to ask you what got you started in magic.
Well, my history goes back quite a bit of time. I started really getting into magic. Oh, about 1965 is when I remember watching Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan was a variety show. It had music and dancers and magic and fire eaters and any kind of variety entertainment you could possibly imagine. But they were all world class acts. So you would see the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. In fact, it was their first introductions into North America from the UK were on Ed Sullivan. In fact, one of the big draws for his show is that he had so many firsts because they had people scouring the world for the latest and greatest that was breaking in another country and that they were coming or were going to come to America. So they would get them on TV right away. And so they had magicians that were phenomenal. And I can remember many of them. And I remember watching Sunday nights, we were glued to the TV, and they had a lot of magicians. And I didn't find out till many years later when I met Jay Marshall from Chicago, who owned Magic Incorporated, who had been one of the acts I saw on Ed Sullivan. Uh, Jay told me that Ed Sullivan's agent was a lover of magic. And Ed pretty well gave him carte blanche to be able to pick the act for his show and was one of the major producers. So he'd always try to get magic acts on. And especially since he was from Chicago, we brought in some Chicago acts. Uh, Funny enough, people like Jay Marshall, I think, were on 17 times or something insane like that, because back then, pre-internet in the 60s, they had letter writing and they would get bags full of mail requesting certain acts. And if they got enough requests, they'd bring them back. Well, some of these acts kept getting over and over and over again. And as you can imagine, a variety act that got to come back multiple times, their fees went through the roof. But I digress. So this got me excited. I wanted to know how the tricks were done. I tried, my mother finally took pity on me. I was like 7 years old. And in where I live in Winnipeg, Canada, there was a brand new library that had just opened up in our area. And we went, and it happened to have two books of magic. And one of them was a biography of Houdini, which was really well written, but it was for kids, and another book for kids on magic tricks. And it was called Magic of the World by John Mulholland. And it was phenomenal. It actually became my entire first show. And not that it was an easy book to read, even though it was written for kids, it was for older kids, but I was pretty precocious. So I powered through it and built the little props out of cardboard and string. And for my 8th birthday party, that I was the entertainment.
I
So
love that.
that was my introduction into magic in an hour-long spiel.
Wow. I love that you went, not only am I going to learn it, but I'm going to be the show for my own party. That's phenomenal. So you started doing magic that way, but at what point did you decide that magic was going to be your life? Was there ever anything else you wanted to be?
Well, no, but I was I have many interests, but science being one of my favorites. And I had visions of grandeur doing many things, but magic was always forefront. I loved magic. I was doing birthday parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs and christenings and you name it, I did it. There was nothing I wouldn't do from uh, I, I mean, if someone had asked me to do a funeral, I probably would have done it. There was no, I had no gates. I would have done anything just to have the ability to perform. If it was at a party or on the street or in a restaurant, I was there. And in fact, I turned professional because of an opportunity in 1973, and I'd been doing quite a few shows during the year because I was cheap. But I was but I was doing a lot of shows, mostly birthday parties and that sort of thing. And I was in a restaurant with my family, and it was quite nice. It was called the Lock, Stock, and Barrel Restaurant. It was kind of a steak and rib joint, and it was kind of a suit and tie sort of place, but not really. So it was business casual, I guess you'd call it. But many people were dressed up and. So we're at the tables as usual. It's a busy Saturday night or so, and we're waiting between the soups and salads. It's a long wait sometimes. So I'm doing anything to occupy myself as well as the table. So I'm doing card tricks and coin tricks and anything I happen to be working on at the time. My poor family were captive audiences. And the funny thing is, their tables around us kept looking and watching. And I would turn around to one and say, take a card or hold on to this salt shaker, whatever the case may be. And the manager, owner of the restaurant walks by and is just watching, and he's having a bit of a chuckle. And I sort of finish, the meal comes. I finish the meal and I'm shy. I mean, I'm a total introvert, but I walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm Brian Glow. I would love to be the house magician here at your restaurant. You see how, it takes so much time between the soup and salad, and that time could be great for an entertainer and keep your guests happy. And happy customers will order more, and the longer they stay, the more they'll drink." And he looks at me like I'm from another planet because I'm this kid telling him his marketing strategy. And I said, "I'll tell you what. Let me go around the tables today, and if you like what I do, maybe you'll have me back." So he said, "Go crazy, and good luck." And I get up and I start walking around the tables doing card tricks and coin tricks and whatever I had in my pockets at the time. It was much, but I used stuff from the tables. And I think any good magician had better know his craft enough to be able to take any object and do something impromptu and amazing. And not just a trick. I hate the word trick. I detest it, because a trick denotes something like, haha, I fooled you and you're an idiot. And I do not like that. I want to take them on a journey. I want them to be amazed and excited and laugh and have a good time, because that's what magic meant to me and still does. So I'm having a good time and people are laughing, and he comes up to me and he said, come to my office. And I thought, either it's good news or bad news. And he says, can you start next Sunday?
Ha! I love it.
Yeah, my schedule is free. So I started 5 to 10 p.m. on Sundays, and that went on for months. And people were coming in, and almost, I'd say 8, 9 months later, he says, hey, can you come in on Saturdays too? We have more youth and kids coming in with their families, and there's a birthday party. And I said, terrific. Now, one of the things that I did right from the very beginning, and I'll go back a little bit, because I had a mentor, and my mentor was a man named Mel Stover. He was a brilliant magician, inventor, puzzle logician, and a true genius. And I don't mean the kind of genius where you say, oh yeah, he's really smart. I mean, this was a 190 IQ genius kind. He wrote puzzles and math problems and chess problems for a living. I mean, and as well as working in an audiovisual department. And I think his work was the hobby, and the magic and the puzzles were his real vocation. So it was very interesting. And he pushed me. He never, if something didn't look good, he'd say, that looks like crap. So I just got into this whole mindset of trying to be always involved with the magic, and really pushing it to as far as it could go. So he said, can you do these Saturdays? And I said, yes. And like we had planned, every table in the restaurant had little tent cards made. And this was my idea, to have my name and ask your server for our house magician. And it's all free, because I wanted to let them know that, one, I didn't want to have to walk up and say, hey, would you like to see the house magician? I think that was belittling. Mm-hmm. And this is something Mel actually really pushed on. There was a very, very famous bar magician named Matt Schulian in Chicago, who was friends with Mel. And Mel saw him perform in restaurants and used to see why this guy was so highly paid. And he did take tips. I decided not to, because I had a bit more of a master plan. And my master plan was, I wanted to use them to know, like, and trust me, and then hire me for other events like parties and banquets and anything else. And sure enough, that's exactly what started happening. Because I had a lot of repeat customers, I would always make sure I had all kinds of extra stuff in my pockets that was available at any moment, so that if I saw someone who was someone I recognized as a regular, and there were many, I could always come up with something special. Hey, Mark, how are you? Glad you brought your friends here. Introduce me to them. I'd love to show you something really special. I'm sure Mark told you that I've been here before, but I've got something really new and special just for him. And what does that tell you? It made people feel special, because I wanted to feel special. If someone did that to me, I'd be on the moon. So I figured that must be a great way to treat people. And guess what? It was a golden ticket. And if you get nothing out of this little talk except that, you'll have gained so much. The idea of and listening to people was incredible, because most of the people coming to this restaurant happened to be business people. And especially on Sundays and Saturdays, it was family, but they were still business people. And I'd always hear from a table at least once a week, oh, you'd be great at my trade show. You'd be great at my banquet. You'd be great at our sales meeting. And I'm going, oh, well, I just happen to have some information about how you can reach me. So I'd always do tricks that left them with business cards or some memory that they could take home. Another thing that made my name indelible is because they got to take something really cool. Uh, and that was important, whether it was a dollar bill that was folded up to look like a bunny coming out of a hat, to a possible object like a golf ball that ended up inside a beer bottle or something like that. Especially for people I knew were coming and I could prepare because I knew they might be special. So I'd always make sure I had something extraordinary for those people. Now, I would do incredible stuff for anyone who came, but I was looking for my future. I was always looking ahead to something else. And then the weirdest thing happens. A year later, they asked if I would do Fridays. So now I'm working Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I'm doing over 40 hours a week of magic. And I had to keep learning over and over. I had to learn new stuff sometimes every week because, again, a lot of repeat customers. So this aspect of trade shows kept coming up. And I said, oh, yeah, it would be great. And I'm going in my head, what's a trade show? Well, a convention center then opened up in our city, a huge one, and around that time. And I went to see what a trade show was. And I was blown away. And for those who don't know what a trade show is, an industrial show or trade show is where like industries or industries surrounding a certain theme will get together to basically show their products or ideas and sell them or get people to know who they are. So you would walk in and there may be 12 or 1,500 booths, and it may be a car show. So you would have everything from windshield wiper displays to auto pumps to car washes to tire manufacturer, you name it, it was there, and of everything you can possibly imagine. And working for one of these clients, say it was a tire company, as a for instance, your job is to bring people to that booth and get a message across in a couple of minutes so that they could then appreciate what this company could do for these people. And this would break the ice so that their clients and their salespeople could then get a face-to-face. It's so important to earn that trust. And you can't do it on a phone call, on a cold call. You can't do it on just a mail out. You can't do it on just a printed piece of information. That face-to-face is in business gold, because who do you buy from? Someone you don't know or someone you know? Almost exclusively, it's from someone you know, because you can see their face, you know if they're trustworthy, and you get that impression when you meet someone for the first time, or many times thereafter, because if they're smart, they're going to keep that conversation going. So my job was to bring people in to a trade show, and how I got those was directly from the restaurant work, where people would say, "Oh, you should do our trade show," and I said, "Well, who's your trade show manager?" I now am learning the nomenclature of the business, so I went in depth. I went to libraries. I went to find out what is the goings on, and there's almost nothing written about it. So I would go to client, I just ask people. I said, who would I talk to? And so I found out it was booth managers, and because they have the power of nay or yay for anything new that's coming in the marketing of that trade show booth. Then you'd end up talking to the marketing company, and essentially it was their budget, because this is not an entertainment budget. This is a marketing budget, which in a company is always bigger than any other part outside of maybe R&D and sales. So you want to target those guys, because that's where the budget is. So that's what I started doing, and literally 500 odd trade shows since then.
Wow.
It's taken me to a lot of places in the world, but probably more of my work is in the large concert after dinner banquet shows, where we would produce full giant concerts with up to 22 people and 3 semi-trailer loads of equipment for massive events. I mean, that's where it grew to, but it all started from those humble beginnings in doing little parties and a restaurant, and then just setting my sights further and further and setting goals and saying, this is where I'm going to go after. And not just being willy-nilly, but literally planning on who I wanted to market to, planning on where I wanted to take my services. And for the most part, for me, I was looking at the highest paying events I could possibly go to. Now, I didn't start off big. I started obviously really small and built up and built up and built up. And funny little local companies sometimes had national branches, and maybe they had regional shows I could do. And then it became a national show. And then all of a sudden I was doing, 4 countries or 6 countries for them because they were international as well. And it's just building and working constantly to improve your image, your marketing, and more than anything else, the trust that you can give them, that you can get the job done for something you say you can do. Because if you can't do it and you say you can do it, you're gone the next day.
Those are, first of all, thank you for all of that. That was so much information. I'm going to be parsing that for weeks. But I think you're absolutely right. The last thing you said is so very true. If you promise something and you can't deliver it, they have zero reason to ever trust you again. And that's it.
Right. And for me, I've always done, undersell and overproduce.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Under promise and over deliver. That's been my motto as much as I possibly can. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the mindset you had. From the very first time you talked to that restaurant manager, you had this vision of the marketing. Now, you probably weren't thinking of it as marketing when you were a teenager. Maybe you were, I don't know. But what were you thinking? Do you remember when you said, "Hey, people are waiting between the soup and the salad"? What was going through your mind? Were you interested in getting the job, or were you interested in having him have the customers be happier? What was the process that you went through, and how did you come up with that? What was going on in your mind?
Well, I was always thinking about marketing, but I was not specifically thinking of marketing to the restaurant at all. When I said no, I meant it was really an off the cuff thing. I was there, took
Mhm.
advantage of a situation and ran with it. I had always known that marketing was key to selling. I mean, no one's going to come to you. I never waited for my phone to ring. It doesn't happen. I mean,
Right.
inbound is the hardest of all things. And I do everything from when I was a little kid, I would have printed off pieces of paper with little cutout what they could tear off my phone number and put them in grocery stores. So, having a birthday party called Magician Brian Glow, and there's my, they rip it off and they call me, but I was always trying to be in their face. It cost nothing except, running around to the stores and putting up these little 8.5 by 11 sheets of, I'd cut the pieces of paper with my, I'd use a typewriter because we didn't have computers then.
Right.
So I'd, I'd, I'd have a little hand-drawn kind of poster. A friend of mine was actually quite a good artist, and I drew a little funny magic looking poster, and then my mom had a typewriter, and we put the paper in sideways, and I typed the phone number over and over
Yeah.
underneath, and then cut them with the scissors, and that that was my first posters, because again there were no Kinkos or any copy places like that. Not back then.
Right. Oh, I remember those ditto sheets with
Yeah,
the hand crank.
the Stetner machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will tell you that I really, in the crazy thing is, I always was thinking of marketing. I thought I was always thinking, how can I do more shows? How can I get out there? How can I get my face? I would call TV stations and radio stations and newspapers constantly. I was so precocious. And I would say, hey, I'm going to be doing such and such of an event. It's Canada Day, and I'm going to be doing a brand new trick. And newspapers and media, I found out, are always looking for stories, because they got to fill those pages. They've got to fill those content of those hours. And if people will make it easier for them and send them story ideas, they love it. So I just kept doing it. Now, maybe to the detriment of me, I did too many. But I got to know people. I mean, oh, when I first got into the restaurant, when I was like 16, oh man, the first thing I did was try to get on TV with it, and did. I got a great little interview, and the guy called me Canada's youngest professional magician, and that stuck for a long time, fortunately, and it was great because I used that, and that got me some TV, some other TV, and some newspaper, and some radio. I had to come up with radio tricks, and that's where Mel really came. He gave me some great ideas for doing some tricks on the radio, and anything I could read and find out about things like that I could change over to radio meant that I could go where no other magician was going, which was radio. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, how did you do that? I don't understand.
Well, that,
I
some wonderful mathematical and mind reading style tricks. And I would also do things where I would say, get a pencil, get a ring, get a coin. I want you to move your coin to the left and 2 steps to the right. And you'd be very descriptive. And at the end of the day, you would tell them what the coin was in your right pocket, the watch is on your left pocket, and the pencil is sitting on your wrist. Oh, and you'd be right. And everybody following along would end up in the same position, and they'd be amazed, even though they started off at different positions because they could mix up their objects.
right.
This was a wonderful, wonderful creative idea. Not mine, I wish it was, but
Oh, it's terrific. The fact that you could do that across radio waves instead of having them watching you or following you along, but just through the power of your voice is incredible. I love it.
yeah, it was quite an epiphany because it meant that it allowed me to get media attention in places I could never get. And that meant any time I went, even to a small town that didn't have TV but had a little radio station, I got to get attention. I got to go to those little local newspapers and do the thing with the local editor, because sometimes those papers only printed every week,
Right.
but the radio was constant. So that kind of was very cool. I had some tricks with calendars, I remember, and a whole variety of wonderful little bits that you could do because it uses your imagination. I think that's the most important part of our entire brain, is the fact that we have an imagination that we can think and create and picture in. That's why books are so great, because you're reading something and you make your own imagery. You watch it on a movie and you go, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be, because you've made up your own story. You've seen that character in your own mind the way you want that person to be or that place to look.
Absolutely. I feel that way a little bit about sort of graphic novelizations of books,
Oh
in
yeah.
that, when I read the book, I envision the entire world. I see it very clearly, but then it feels like there's something different if I see the movie version or the graphic novel version of a book,
Yeah.
because they didn't choose what I chose, and why would they? Because they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And but it is a little bit of sort of cognitive dissonance then trying to make that trying to make that work. It is interesting, but with the radio, you sort of had it was almost like the book version, right? They weren't going to be seeing it. They were going to be doing it themselves, which I think is even cooler, that you amaze yourself because you're the one doing it and you didn't expect it.
Right. Now, I'm not the first magician mentalist, to do radio. Um, there was a mentalist that was very famous named Dunninger, and that was his medium. I mean, he
Mhm.
was he was on pre-television days, and he would sell out the biggest concert halls, and he was a household name at that in those days.
Mhm.
And he did entire radio shows that were incredible. And of course, there were ventriloquists and other people who could do that. Now, it's pretty easy for a ventriloquist to get away with radio.
Yeah. Just
It's hard.
pan it over to the other speaker. That's easy.
But it's funny because Charlie McCarthy, which was the ventriloquial character,
You mean
was
Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy? That's what you're talking about?
Edgar's puppet. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Edgar was very famous, but the puppet got the headline.
Sure.
Charlie McCarthy, and that's exactly how and he knew that that's how he could sell it. Now, when he translated to TV, he was a star. He was already a star
Yeah.
because people knew his voice so perfectly, and they knew the character of Edgar Bergen, of Charlie McCarthy.
Yeah, and I remember when we first came to the USA, being I had no idea what a ventriloquist was, what what was happening, except for that I could see that the puppet, the dummy is as they're called, I guess, was talking, and yet I knew he wasn't real, so I didn't understand, and my parents didn't either. They had never seen ventriloquism because in the Soviet Union, I guess there wasn't any such thing in their lifetime. So it was mystery, and that idea of the mystery, the mysterious and the mystical, almost the qualities of magic and even ventriloquism, that's I think it's on the same somehow on the same plane. What do you think of that? Is that something that you could agree
No,
with?
absolutely. I think anytime you can, I mean, if we can engage the imagination of another human being and take them on that journey, no matter whether it's a movie, a radio show, a magician, a musician, someone doing a meditation, anything that engages the mind to be able to go beyond its current state, to be able to change your day to day is wonderful. I mean, uh, I guess my life was changed with books because I was an incredible reader. I would at least do 3 books a week. I mean, just nonstop. And that shaped my life. That shaped my view of the world because
Mhm.
living in Winnipeg, it was at that time not a big city in Canada. We're in the center of Canada, near the U.S. border, but still very, very, very cold place. It's
Hmm.
45 below zero in the winter, and
Yikes.
get up to 80s and higher in the summer. So it had this vast range, but at the same time, it was also 10-hour drive to the nearest other city, you
Right.
know, of size. There were obviously small towns and things, but so there wasn't much here. There were no magic shops. There were no, so you had to use that imagination to entertain yourself and create things. And I love creating. I love inventing and working on things that just haven't ever been around before. I find that quite exciting. Inventors to me were heroes.
Who's your favorite inventor?
Oh, my
Come on,
favorite.
you can't say that without me asking the question.
Did you
D-
hear me?
No, I didn't. It went silent.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, somehow I'm not surprised.
Absolutely one of the true geniuses of the planet. And the things that he had thought of that are just coming to fruition. I mean, here's a man who thought of a helicopter 400 years before it was even a possibility.
Right.
It's like, but he had observed birds and he had drawn why air currents could flow on the feathers and why they expanded out. I mean, he did some of the groundwork for amazing. He was a weapons inventor. He was an artist. He was a biologist. He would study human anatomy. He was a complete polymath. Was interested in everything, and I was too. To me, Da Vinci and Isaac Newton and Einstein, and these are the people I wanted to emulate. I mean, I was lucky because I had the opportunity to go to school, and I because of the magic shows I did, I got to pay for university myself. I didn't have to burden my parents with it, and I didn't have to get loans. So I got a degree in physiological psychology for research medicine, another in computer science, and another in anthropology. So I get to use those things to help make my my magic, my shows, as good and or as great as I can make them. And I continue to this day to use them, especially now that I've, since about 78, I've done quite a bit of work with anti-suicide, anti-bullying throughout the world, but mostly in Canada. And in the last 11 years, mostly in the ultra remote communities of the Arctic. And if it wasn't for some of those skills, so some of the knowledge that I'd learned from doing all of that and continuous study since that time, that it's enabled me to be able to use magic in a way that is was I don't think thought of, which was taking messaging and linking it with magic to make it very indelible. So the message was quite clear and remember. So the same work that I did while I did trade shows where I had to get a product of a client or a message of a client to the people walking by and 35,000 people a day, past a booth that it was 10 feet by 10 feet and you had to stop people and get that message across or you were useless to them. I had to get that message to stick and be interesting. So I took those skills of decades of doing that and utilized that same idea of getting some of these important social messages across to the youth. And I continue to do that.
That's sacred work. Wow. You and I have talked a little bit about that before. It's so important, especially in sort of these remote places that don't have access to all of the facilities that somewhere in a big city, that someone who's having these kinds of challenges might have in a big city. So it's amazing to me that you're able to go to these remote places and really work with people to help them find solace and resources. And what's the latest on that? Where were you going, and what are the plans for it?
Well, when the current situation abates, I will be in Alaska, Northwest Territories, the Yukon, Nunavut, and Nunavik, which is above northern Quebec, dealing mostly with First Nations, the Dene, the Inuit peoples, what used to be called Eskimo. They are at such high risk because of their isolation, and these
Sure.
communities I was fortunate to finally get towards as close as I could to the North Pole, which was Grise Fiord, the closest community in the world to the North Pole. But there's 123 people who live there, and at any one time, there's only maybe 60 to 80 people in the community because the rest are out hunting because there's no store. So if you don't hunt and fish, you die. It's that remote, and it it's a wonderful, wonderful community, great people. And unlike you would think, they do have now internet access. They don't have cell phones, but they do have communications. One thing the Canadian government did many years ago was to start the infrastructure and now complete coast to coast to coast. The fact that we could get internet services to be able to, maybe the bandwidth is not very good. It might be akin to dial-up at sometimes, and if there's strong winds, and that could knock out the satellites, or the satellite dishes, which happens far more often than you'd possibly want. But they're starting to do teleschooling, where they do remote schooling to other communities around the world, and starting to do conferencing. So it's not like they are so isolated now that they don't know what's going on, but they're isolated physically,
Sure.
being hours and hours from flights or thousands of miles away physically from anybody else. Uh, Consequently, the ultra poverty and the food scarcity and the loneliness mounts to a point where it's the highest suicide rates on the planet, anywhere between 11 and 30 times the possibility of suicide in any other place in the world. So there are communities there that have 200-300 people and might have 12-14 attempts in a month, and sometimes none, and then sometimes there's it's the attempts are not just calls for help. They are serious attempts at killing themselves.
Hmm.
And it's devastating. And it's devastating to have to talk to people who you've just heard that in 2.5 years, 12 of their family members have killed themselves. And you're hearing it from a 12-year-old kid who's now planning on killing themselves on Tuesday. And you're the only one there. There's no social workers. There's ill-trained wellness workers who try their very, very best. A psychiatrist may come to a community once a year, maybe. There's a nursing station. Doctors fly in on occasion. Most likely, if there's a problem, they fly out to a hospital somewhere, which could be hours away, which, as you can imagine, does not bode well for a patient.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, you land in these places going, what am I doing here? So,
Well, I mean, what you're doing obviously is helping a lot of people who didn't have much hope. And I think you give them that gift, like you said yourself, that gift of imagination and that gift of envisioning something different and something better. That's priceless. I really.
I hope so. I mean, I come into the communities. I have a multi-pronged approach. I usually do a free show for the entire community, so they get to know who I am. I do the anti-bullying shows, classroom to classroom sometimes, but usually I'll have grades like 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, and 9 through 12 in 3 sections. The youngest ones, we just do some fun tricks, and you know the messaging isn't getting across. And kindergarten to grade 2 in most communities in the Arctic have not learned any English yet. They're speaking Inuktitut, which I don't speak, as an attempt to regain their language skills
Mhm.
that they lost because of the issues during the 60s and residential schools. And it was another horrible thing that happened to indigenous people throughout North America. But these are things that were past, but the hardships have still continued, and the effects of what happened to their parents or their great grandparents or their grandparents. 60 years ago, a lot of the people were still on the land, nomadic,
Mhm.
and not living in communities. So it's still recent history, to go from a nomadic lifestyle crossing, you know, communities will maybe reach sometimes temperatures of -60 or more.
Incredible.
Incredible stuff. And I mean, I went ice fishing with a group at -52 degrees. This is, talk about insane, but when in Rome. So it was fabulous. And I've gone dog sledding with them, and I've gone out with them onto the ice, and uh, just a wonderful experience. But more importantly, I, I, I'm coming into a community knowing that I'm not of their culture, and they are very, very, very skeptical of anyone outside coming in. So it takes years and years, because this is completely there just to help. There's to get the messaging across, encourage people to go to school and stay in school and graduate, um, communication skills of what to look for if signs of suicide, look for what to look for in elderly who are lonely and also contemplating it. It's these are we take these for granted because we can go to someone, we can go to a counselor, we can go to a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trained in that. I mean, I have taken many, many courses. That's irrelevant. The fact is, when you're in the throes of your life of what is going on in these communities, your vision skews completely to another side because you just weren't expecting it. Nothing you've been trained in prepares you. Nothing. And I mean, you walk into a house where there's 12 people or 15 people living in a little house because there's a housing shortage. There's just nowhere for them to live. So they're crammed in. So if someone gets sick, it spreads instantly to entire households.
Right.
And then who's going to bring in the food? And that's not every community. I mean, but certainly many. And that's not just here. I mean, this is a worldwide issue. It's not just the Canadian Arctic and the American Arctic.
No, I'm sure it's not. And yet you've taken it on, and are, everybody can see the issue, or can learn about the issue, but not everybody's going to go, you know what, I'm going to go do something about the issue. So that's my mother would say it's a mitzvah. What you're doing is one gigantic mitzvah. um let me ask you, what, if you are willing to share, what got you started, what made you decide that this was something that you wanted to do, that you wanted to bring this messaging of suicide prevention and awareness to these remote areas?
Well, I was severely bullied from about grade 5 to grade 12. And I was not going to bad schools. I was going to some nice schools, but it only takes a few. And this is in the 60s, and even 70s. This was not an issue as forefront as it is right now, where we realize the damage and psychological issues that come from bullying. But I was at a point where, I mean, someone had attempted to stab me, choke me, throw me down 3 flights of stairs. Was in a field getting
Goodness.
by a group of people. It was, and why? I don't know. I had red hair. I mean, I was short. I was, you know what I mean? There's nothing. I was too meek, and I was introverted. And funny enough, it's a strange introversion, because when I did magic, I came alive, but
Right.
only for that period of time. And then even like now, I just, I'm like a creature in a shell. I just suck back into the shell when no one's around, and I feel great. I did my little thing and I'm gone. I don't stay around for the parties. I go home and I'll read. But so I mean, the culture. I was not a hockey and football and soccer player, and I wasn't in the group. I wasn't in the crowd. I was a loner. So what better person to pick on?
And it's funny because asking the why, uh, on some level doesn't make sense, because I don't think they even know sometimes, the
No,
bullies,
I mean, I go in quite a bit when I'm talking to the kids. I mean, now I get it. There are definitely things you can do to be less of a target. And I teach a whole section on what we call resiliency training. And this was an American psychologist named Izzy Kallman who created this system, a brilliant methodology for, um, how would I say, fighting back non-violently with bullying. Now, when I talk about bullying, I am not talking about some bunch of kids who beat you up and punch you out. That's a crime. That is a crime. And I'm sick and tired of people saying, oh, it's just bullying. It's not. If you did that as an adult, you'd be in prison.
Sure.
I do not see why kids get away with it any less, because they know they can and will take advantage of it. I was having a one-on-one discussion with one kid who was quite severely depressed, and a kid walked up to him, and I would say we were talking grade 3, and just walked up to him and punched him in the face and walked away.
Wow.
And the kid literally fell into my arms. I caught him, and a teacher grabbed this child, and that your jaw drops. You've just finished talking about this. and there you start to realize that there are other social issues besides, I mean, there's mental health issues, there is this FASD and fetal alcohol syndrome, and there's all kinds of other issues at play that cannot be solved with just talking about stuff. So there has to be some actions. But having said that, whatever you can do is better than nothing. I just did not want anyone to ever have to suffer the way I did when I was a kid. And it started in 1978 quite accidentally when I was called by a principal of a school at a show, at a school I had done a few months earlier. I had done a very large production show. And she called up and she said, "I don't know why I'm calling you, but I'll tell you the story." And they had a young man who had attempted quite eagerly to kill himself by suicide 3 times. And he had just come back after being away from the community for several months. He obviously he was hospitalized, and he was coming back to be integrated back to the community. And when she had talked to him and asked him, "Is there anything in your life that you like? Because you keep saying there's nothing worth living for. There's nothing you want to do." She said quite pointedly, "Is there anything in your life you liked?" And she said, "Yeah, I like that magic guy." She said, "That's why I'm calling you." And I'm on the other
Wow.
side of the phone going, now remember, this is 1978. I had just graduated university. I was just kind of, I was young. And all of a sudden, this massive gauntlet is being thrown down to me. And I said, "Let me call you back." And I made a quick call to an airline that I dealt with. That was a very small airline that went to a lot of the communities. And I told the president of the company, who I knew, because I had done their Christmas parties, and I said, "Hey, this is what's going on. I've flown to your community before. I'm doing this thing, and I want to get to this community, do something for him." And he said, "Be there in the morning. It's on us."
Wow.
So I start packing. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea. It's never dawned on me that I would do anything like this, but I thought I'd do anything. So I just literally filled a couple of suitcases full of tricks and a couple of T-shirts and a pair of jeans, and off I went. And in the morning, I went up, and the only idea I had was that I would take this kid around with me somehow, some way to do something. And I would pull his name out of a hat or something. And, magically, if I can't make someone's name appear out of a hat, I'm a bad magician. So suddenly I pull this child's name out, and they're going to be my assistant to come around. And one of the things that I had done since I was a very young kid was tricks with math and science and geography and history. I mean, literally my first birthday party, remember I told you about Magic of the World, that book, that was the book. The book's premise was each trick was from a different country. And I said, that's going to be my hook. And I would go from classroom to classroom, and maybe this kid I can get to talk to me. Because this is the thing, they didn't know what was going on. He would not talk to anybody. So that was my simple plan. And on the first day, he said not one word to me. I knew his first name. That's it. And I keep asking him to bring things and hold things. And, he was like an elk in headlights. He was just standing there in shock. But he liked what was happening. He liked the tricks. And I started doing things where I would teach the class how to do a trick, simple little tricks. And again, you know how I hate the word tricks, but at this point, that's really what it was. They were just simple beginner things to have fun and to be interesting. But then I started telling them how to weave a story and how to take this simple little trick and make it into something more than this stupid little trick. And we would talk about storytelling, which worked wonderful in the communities. And I found, and I've used that as a basis for everything I do now. But it started then. And so around the third day, I said, "Hey, this tricks that I'm doing, do you think you could do one of them and help me show these younger kids that we're going to be doing a show for today Could you help me out and do it for them? And he said, yeah, okay. And he starts doing it, and the kids are reacting and they're laughing, and he is wearing the first smile I've seen in 3 days. And if nothing else, I was going, okay, we've got a one check mark in the win column.
Right.
And at the end of the day, he says, hey, can I talk to you? I said, sure. So we go into an empty classroom and we sit down, and he starts pouring out a story that still haunts me. What was being done to him by a family member was unbearable. And I am not a therapist. I am not licensed. I got no degrees, and I have also no medical issues in terms of confidentiality. And I went to the principal that night. I went to her house and I knew what was going on. The RCMP, the federal police, came. They grabbed him, speared him out of the community as fast as they could, arrested 2 family members, and saved his life, I think. I kept in communication with him for over 15 years. He became a drug and alcohol counselor, helping other kids. And I'll tell you, it stuck with me all this time. And on occasion, we bump into each other online, and it's pretty amazing. He's got a family, he's got kids, he's stable, but it was amazing, and it changed my entire life. So I started doing it anytime I went to anywhere in the world. I'd go to hospitals, I'd go to schools, I'd start just doing these things and learning and read and then took courses. And boy, it's been a journey. But I'll tell you, it was not what I wanted to do. It's not what I ever thought I would do. But now that I'm in my 60s, I'm going, you know what? I like this. I'm doing more and more and more of it. Spent 6-8 months a year doing that, as well as still doing my corporate shows, which is my bread and butter, because the other ones aren't really paying. But I've made a good living, so I can do things like this when I feel like it, and I do it a lot. So for the last 11 years has been concentrating in the Arctic, but I've done it in Japan, I've done it in Southeast Asia, Europe, South America, not South, Central America. So yeah, it's been interesting.
And so necessary. There are so many children who feel alone and helpless, and providing even a little bit of solace, but also someone who understands them and says to them, no, what you're going through is not normal, is huge.
Yeah.
Because how do you know, as a child, how do you know that it's not normal if this is all you know? How do you know?
I think most people know it's not normal if this is happening, but they don't know what to do. They don't know. There's no one they can turn to. They think the embarrassment level. I mean, I never even told my parents. And some of the worst things. I mean, I was just too afraid and embarrassed. And so I can bring those things to the table because I did live through them.
Hmm.
More importantly, it's not just talking about it, but doing something about it, giving tools uh, to do some coping. But and even more than that is instilling hope and instilling some joy and giving them positive outlets that they can say this does end. There's a point where it stops, and more than almost always after school. But I want you to stay in school. But I mean, the idea is we don't give timelines, and I don't talk about not going to school. God, most of the things that I do talk about is how important education will set you free, because
Absolutely.
what they're not going to get. You get educated, you can go anywhere in the world. You can do anything, and if you want to stay in the communities, great. But you can be a leader. You can bring two skills to the community that no one has ever had before or willing to do. You could be that person. You could be that thought leader. And it doesn't take that much more than you think. It's doing that little extra bit, that 1% more than everyone else. It's just that you're ahead of the game. And the more you learn and the more you can create, and for me, everything is about creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to create shows for not only my own show, but theater, opera, rock bands. I've done the Winter Olympics and the Pan American Games and multitude award shows, and always coming up with interesting ideas. And it's all about imagination, but it starts with having a base of knowledge and increasing that base of knowledge nonstop. And that can be in anything.
Yeah, it's whatever subject is the one that makes you curious, is the one that sparks your imagination. But let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. Hold on. That's the beauty of having a raw, real, and unedited show. Sometimes the phone rings, the cat meows, and you have to cough. So how do you develop a show? You say it starts with imagination. Perhaps it starts with a what if. That's how I develop most everything I develop, or how I've written 6 books. It's a what if.
Right.
What do you do? Do you have the concept first? Do you think in steps? What happens when you are developing a new show or a new piece within a show? What is your process?
That's a very tough question. I say that because my mind just seems asunder all the time. It's just firing. Sometimes I want to create. I have a project, and many of the things that I've done were project oriented, where I have to be able to make a new 2025 concept car appear in an incredible way, where one of the things I did was take a 1930 version of a vehicle and morph it to a concept vehicle, and using the technology at hand, but doing it in a live production was making it look like you were watching a television show. So
Wow.
it was pretty. But I had a goal. I had an end point.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "Oh, car appearance," and then I said, "Okay, what's never been done before?" So that was something I don't think had ever been done before. So we did that. So it's a lot easier when you have parameters set. So either you set your own parameters and a goal saying, I want this to happen. Then you worry about how to make it happen. But coming up with the idea is probably the hardest part of everything. Figuring it out, if you have enough knowledge, is easy. There are many, many, many ways of doing things magically. And if not, there are resources you can look to find out how they're done. And I will say that the galactic encyclopedia known as YouTube and Google have changed my life.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I started out in 1973 with key punch cards. And typing them out, and then taking a bus ride to the university to run the key punch cards, and learning to number them, because after you slipped on the ice and your 300 cards have flown across the snow-bound drifts of Winnipeg.
Oh no.
only had to happen once.
Right. Some lessons you learn quickly.
Yeah. And then suddenly, we had CRT screens that connected us, but I mean, I've been blessed. I got to be, an early adopter with computers, and I put them into my business. I put them into everything, and especially now, I mean, I will utilize every possibility of garnering knowledge, and YouTube's great. I mean, I had a windshield wiper fly off my van, and I, for the life of me, could not connect it together.
Mm-hmm.
Only a clip. I took my iPhone out and I Googled how to clip. And 10 minutes later, I was driving away with a new windshield wiper flopping away, doing just fine. Thank you very much. And it was a little pin that had not been placed correctly. And I saw how to place it, and click. I would have been in a blizzard with no windshield wiper, screaming at the top of my lungs at my ineptitude of mechanics to being able to put a windshield wiper on it had it not been for YouTube. So
Second biggest search engine in the world. It's brilliant. Yeah. I have a sick kitty right now, and he had to have it's called a nasogastric tube, where they put a tube in through your nose in directly into your belly so that we can feed him because he can't actually eat right now. And interestingly, the vet was like, "Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to feed him?" I'm like, "I've got Google and YouTube. I'm gonna be just fine." And sure enough, we've had him eating very well this way, and it's because I was able to Google how do you feed a cat doing this, and there are plenty of videos, tons of videos on how to do it. It is amazing if you're curious,
yeah,
and to me, that's sort of my my goal in life is curiosity, being curious and satisfying curiosity, and then being curious about something else and then asking those questions. So that is, I love that we have this. I agree with you. I love that we have this as a potential.
I do not watch cat videos, but I will allow myself to go down a rabbit hole in search of something, and the branches are so incredible. I was trying to, I was looking for specific kinds of magnets, rare earth magnets that were of a specific dimension but had certain properties. And I started searching these, which led me to a memory wire, which led me to another source. And, an hour later, I was in 11 pages of notes later of things, of ideas that I could utilize for stuff that I had never seen used before, going, oh, I can use this, I can do that, I bet I could do this with this. And you got to let yourself do that. uh, but for me to while away the time, I'm sure some people, and I don't knock anybody watching cat videos if they want to, but it's not my, I don't have that kind of time. Maybe at some point I'll be sitting drooling, and that's all I'll care about.
Well, and at the same time, you have a cat, so
I
you
have a
have
cat.
your own three-dimensional cat video right in front of you. So
I used to have three cats. I've got two dogs and a cat right now, and at least the family does because I'm on the road and they take care of them. But
mm,
I do love our animals. I've had animals most of my life, so
yeah, and they're amazing,
all the
amazing companions. So speaking of your family life and your work life together, can you talk about your daily routine a little bit? I mean, I know at home right now because of the pandemic, things are different. But what goes on for you? How do you, because I my goal, as I mentioned earlier, is to give resources to people, and sometimes it's, hey, go to YouTube and look this up, but sometimes it's, this is the thing that I meditate every morning. That's one of the things that sustains me, is to do even just 10 minutes of meditation or 5 minutes of meditation. That helps me. That's part of my routine, like getting out of bed and brushing my teeth. It's just part of my routine. What do you do? What's your day like?
well, I don't sleep a lot, but that's just nature, not something I've cultivated. I've just never slept. I found out maybe only 2 years ago that I have three kinds of insomnia. So
Three kinds. My goodness.
I have an insomnia. I actually went through a sleep study in a hospital to find out. They put electrodes all over me. Apparently, I have a very difficult time falling asleep. I guess chemical production. I have a very hard time because I wake up, I have a hard time falling back to sleep. And then I had sleep apnea, where I actually stopped breathing during sleep. And apparently, I probably was like that since childhood. I did not know. But as I got older, it's, you had better take care of that or you're going to have a heart attack and die. And so CPAP machines became part of my life. And that's okay because they actually help me sleep. So, hey, but having said that, I tend to get up around 5:30, quarter to 6 every day. I start by, well, probably the first thing I do is check email because, unlike a lot of people, I'm getting mail from all over the world, different time zones. So what's 8 o'clock in the morning for them is not my time. So could be
Right.
14-hour differences, and especially in Asia and things. So the first thing I do is check to see what's going on. Less so now, because not a heck of a lot is happening in terms of current shows, but that doesn't mean I'm not still marketing and getting my message out. I do not stop that. There's no reason to stop it. The world still runs. The world is going to be just fine. Thank you very much. It's a horrible thing that's happening. It is incredibly horrible. But we've gone through pandemics before, a couple of them, at least in my lifetime. And eventually things normalize. Maybe it's a new normal, and that's fine. I mean, I'm a scientist at heart. I know what's going on, and my background is in medicine, so I am really aware with this. And my hobby was level 4 viruses, so I'm intimately knowledgeable about everything from Ebola and hemorrhagic fever to what's going on with COVID. But having said that, I'm also a realist, and we will get back, and businesses will happen again. It will be different. Mark my words. Air travel is going to be one of the hardest hit things we have, because how do you keep up at the level and speed that was without the possibility of transmitting? Now, if we're fortunate enough to get a vaccine, and more than likely we will, probably within 18 months, not in 9 months, but maybe in 18 months or so, when some good clinical trials are done, things will go back together much faster, because that worry will have been alleviated. But if it doesn't, and for that foreseeable future, we are going to be still living in very restricted living conditions. The way it is now is not sustainable, but we have to. So, but at the same time, we have to continue to plan is for the best, that things are going to get better. If we do not have that mindset, we are just going to be living in fear and loathing, and that does not bode well for the human race. So I tend to always lean for more than half full. I'm always a positive person. So are things going to come back for entertainers? Slowly. And, we are the canaries in the mine. We are the first to go, and we're the last to come back in terms of our services being needed. As much as we know that they're needed more and more and more, especially now, in terms of a paid function, for me in the corporate world, I'm not going to be their first priority. Getting their clients back and getting their customers happy and getting their messages out is going to be paramount. I don't think they're going to be thinking of it as entertainers doing that work for them right away. It's just too soon. And for me, for trade shows, conventions, banquets, trade shows, sales meetings, anything large where you have large gatherings of people, it's not going to happen quickly.
Right.
So I have to be realistic. So I have to reinvent myself. So where am I working? I'm working on projects where I can coalesce my, professional career since 73 till now, and start working on ways of disseminating that knowledge to new people and younger people, or people who want to maybe transform from amateur entertainer to professional, but don't know how to do it. So I'm producing courses. I'm writing not only the theories, but the practicalities of what I've done over these decades to sustain myself as an entertainer, and a well-paid entertainer, to be able to travel around the world and use your love of whatever entertainment or whatever profession you want to be in, because it doesn't just mean an entertainment professional. You can go from amateur anything to professional anything, whether it's rock hunter to geologist to a closet musician to singer songwriter on stage. There's I'm not limiting it to magicians, jugglers, fire eaters. It's everything. But being an amateur of something, becoming a professional of something else, and I can attribute my success to having a good roadmap, and I can pass that knowledge on. So that's what I'm working on the most. And when I get up in the morning, those are the projects I'm working on. But those skills have got to be honed, and it means that I have to learn about videography, and I have to learn about live broadcasting, and I have to learn about the building lists and getting information out on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And these are things, but I probably should have worked on more. I mean, I have for 15 years, I've been involved in doing them, but never to the level that I need to get to now. So I am honing those skills. These are some of the things that I do till I go to bed at midnight or later. And it to me is exciting. Now I compartmentalize some things so I don't get bored. I work on the new show that we're creating, a show called Glow in the Dark, and it's a one-man comedy magic show. That's one of the best shows I've ever produced, and it's fun, and it's layered with graphics and video and music, and it's the first time I've done such a massive multimedia production. It takes a one-man magic show and looks like the 22-person concerts we used to have, but most of it's done with technology. So it gives me the ability to get to places and do massive shows with limited budgets, and yet still have the quality and production work of full-blown concerts. So that excites me to no end.
Wow. Where is this going to be though? Is it just going to be online? Are you going to be
Oh no, I
selling?
mean, the show is a live show.
Uh-huh.
That's not a video show. That's an experiential show. You have to experience magic live for it to have meaning. Watching magic on YouTube is great if you want to learn magic. And I've just in the midst of getting just over 100 to 300 tricks online that people learn. Really simple stuff, but simple magic that is incredible. Again, getting away from the idea of the trick. And there's hundreds of videos that'll show you how to do a trick. There's very few that can create amazement. You know what I mean? It's the difference between here, take a card. This is your card. Haha. To here are these 4 cards that maybe there are 4 aces that one by one slowly morph into different cards that change color, that suddenly float out of the deck and become the card that you were merely thinking of. It's so beyond what a trick is. And yet it starts out with the simple premise of a pick a card, here's your card. But the end point is so much further down the rabbit hole. It's incredible.
I have to stop you. I'm sorry. Where does this come from? How do you come up with this stuff, Brian? This is incredible.
Well, that's again, it's knowledge. It's years and years and decades of study, hard work, and then learning the basics, imagination and creativity, take off from that point to make it what is not normal, what is not the norm, what's not the average. It's beyond. It's not settling for ordinary.
Is it psychology? What is it? What is the amalgam of principles and disciplines that you use to make these amazing?
It is the psychology, it's the scripting, it's the presentation, it is the music, it is the storylines, the background, the presentation of your attitude of how you present the trick. It's how you take it from that simple, thing that you learned when you were 8 years old and make it into a miracle of a semi-religious nature that you could start whole new cults with. I mean, but you have to understand that's how a lot of this started. So this is not new. It's just being used for good instead of evil. So
yes, please always use your powers for good. Please continue doing that.
I mean, Uri Geller used to say, I'm not a trickster. This is real. He was an Israeli psychic, in nightclubs for years before he suddenly things were spoons were bending, and he had the ability since he was a child. Well, people
Right.
believe stuff if you have conviction.
Right.
Well, he's the guy living in a multi-million-dollar mansion, so I can't.
Yeah. He can say it, and if people believe it, I guess that's
Yeah, but the internet is full of people who say things with conviction, and people don't do their research, and they just parrot it, and they keep telling others about it, and so it must be true because
right.
that person said it, and you go, that just doesn't even sound logical. What
Right.
idiocy! So we won't get into that because there's too much of it. But
For sure.
for my point is that I'll give you a great working example. I was doing, I won't go into the companies because it's private, but um, let's go back to that book, The Magic of the World by John Mulholland. There was a trick called Shefakash, which was a Chinese coin trick. And what happened is I had a very large banking conference I was doing overseas, and part of it was on globalization of currencies, and the theme was on 50%. And I always theme my corporate events for the clients. It's not a out of the bag show. It's always got messaging, it's always got imagery, it's always got something to do with the conference itself. So obviously money and credit and everything else had to be utilized in the show. And I had the president of a major bank on stage with me, and I took a pocket square and had him hold the four corners and showing different coins from different parts of the world. Three of them were Asian, and they had holes through them, and three did not. And we counted the six coins, not do any sleight of hand. I could not touch them. We dumped the coins into the little pocket square and introduced a silver cord, just a piece of silver string. It was just some braiding for something. It looked pretty, and tied it into a circle. And we were talking about how the 50% and the clawback and all the technical jargon that they understood. And as I banged the cloth that he was holding, suddenly the three Asian coins were threaded on the piece of string. And when he opened up the cloth, the three other coins from different parts of the world were left in the cloth. And the messaging had to work around China's influence and blah, blah, blah. But the idea was over a giant, 40-foot video screens, and the 4,500 plus people that were there witnessed this thing, and it hit home so powerfully because it encompassed everything they wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
This trick is the one I learned when I was 7.5 years old, 8 years old, and was in my very, very first show. And when it was just a trick. And I took it to a point where a corporate audience of bazillionaires were witnessing this money miracle that had a message that was so strong that it encompassed the message of the entire meeting for that week. So that's how magic can be used if you use your imagination.
And it's powerful on so many levels, and it gets their message across, but it also shows them, that you're more than worth the money, that they pay you to go. Do you do a lot of research ahead of time? Like, how do you prepare something that's so customized for a corporate gig like that? What do you do to make sure that you're going to get their messaging across? Do you interview them? Do you study? What's the process there?
We send a questionnaire with 10 questions,
Mm,
and the 10 are the kind of the fill in the blank that I can use to, with a vast repertoire, say this, and this will work. Now, remember, I've done so many thousands of shows. In the early 2000s, I surpassed 10,000 shows. I don't know what it's at now, but with that experience, you get to a point where you can say, this will work. I can use this message. And I've known in this industry, I do a lot of high tech shows. So I know all of these tricks are great for high tech stuff. And many of them have a lot of the same points,
Mm-hmm.
but they are fine tuned for the individual companies. But if it's a general theme of, high tech, well, I can literally pull stuff together and have a high tech looking show that encompasses, latest technologies. I did a lot of high security shows. I was working for one company for 7 years from Belgium that had me traveling all over to every major security show, including Interop, and these are where people like the NSA give the keynote speech. So
Mm.
they're really amazing. So I've developed, these kinds of materials based on the clients that want me.
Mm-hmm.
So do I have standard shows? Sure, and they can be modified to look like anything for any client. But I get a little deeper because especially for my bigger clients, which demand a hell of a lot more.
It sounds like it. I mean, that specific, that customized and custom tailored to what your client needs for this one meeting is different than what they're going to need for the next meeting, even if it's the same client, I imagine.
Yeah, well, more importantly, it's how I sell myself. First of all, they're not looking for a magician. I'm going to them saying, here's what I can do for you. And here's some examples of things. And here's the companies I've worked with. And I am selling a customized show. I am telling them that, you're not getting Joe Blow the magician. You're getting a customized, entertainer who has, the experience to be able to do and get the messages that you want across. And if it's just straight out entertainment, that's fine, but your name's going to be plastered all over this thing. It's going to be in props. It's going to be in the name. It's going to be in the scripting. And I've developed the shows for that specific reason. And have done that for 40 plus years more.
And you've had companies,
That's what
you're
separates me from the other guy. So that you have to differentiate. If you are going to succeed in any business, especially in the entertainment, you have got to differentiate from the guys who just do it by rote. You have got to be that extra 10% or 50 or 80% more than everybody else. Or sometimes it's only 1%, but you have to be different.
you have to be different, it seems like, and you also have to be something that they want or need. You have to present yourself as someone who will solve their problems or who will augment what they're doing in a way that will be really important to them, I imagine.
Yeah, I do not, I go to them. They're not coming to me. They're not thinking of a magician. I sell myself as the problem solver. That has always been my acronym for decades, where I have come in and said, I've got the solution to your problem. This is, you may not know you got a problem, but you do. And here's what they are. And now this is where the internet has been the greatest tool in the world, where you can go into a company and start investigating what they do, what the products are, what their services are, and take that knowledge. And before you make the first introduction email, before you make that first call, before you do any contact, you have a path. You're not winging it. You have 3 or 4 or 5 bullet points that you want to get across. That is what they do. You know what they make. You know the widget they design. You know something about them. Because if you're not interested enough to do that, why should they even consider you?
Right. So who do you talk to when you do this? When you contact them, are you contacting the CEO and going, "Hey, you've got a problem?"
Well,
Or
and first of all, I never phrase it as you
of course not. Of course not.
I
I was
present
being flip.
the way I do things is they their problem might be as simple as we have software and we're going to a show and we can't show anything because we don't have anything physical to and tangible to hold and feel and touch and see. We can show you software on a screen and people will just walk by.
Right.
How do I get those people to stop and look and listen? That is my job
Mhm.
description, at least in trade shows. And when it comes down to sales meetings and product launches, that's a whole another animal because a sales meeting, you're preaching to the choir. You're just giving them more information about something new and interesting and cool. And in the product launch, you're creating from the ground up with a marketing company and advertising companies and engineers from the ground up a launch of something that you hope to hell is going to be phenomenal. The so depends what area you're looking at. If you're doing a trade show, as an example, you're working with an existing product with existing marketing. So you're going to be talking to the people who are the ground contacts for the trade show booths. That's the specific managers. If you're talking about a sales meeting, you are talking to a marketing department, which is
Mhm.
but may not be um, the advertising department, which has got the biggest budget. These guys might be the the in-house marketing group.
Mhm.
When you're doing a product launch, you are now dealing with everybody from the president to the advertising company to the outsourced um, advertising, marketing, and social media people to the people who actually made the device or software and getting input from everybody and having to take a bit of this and a bit of that and appeasing a lot of people. It's certainly the hardest of all of those.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so much to be aware of, and also to have sort of you've been doing this a long time, but at some point, back at the restaurant, you came up with a brilliant marketing strategy for the manager to grab onto. Were you ever afraid? Were you ever nervous about contacting some of these people and going, "Hey, this is something that I can help you with"?
Well, yeah, you're always filled with self-doubt, but that's where you have to overcome that.
Mhm.
That is the mindset of confidence. And how do you have confidence? You get really good at what you're doing and know that you can do the technical stuff, i.e., the tricks, the music, the poetry, whatever, blind and stupid and drunk. And then the rest is just convincing other people that they need you. Not that you're good enough or anything, that they need you.
Mhm. Mhm.
You this is where everyone fails when they're first starting out. You have got to create a market. You've got to have a niches where you fit in their world because they have never thought there isn't out of 1,000 people doing banquets, trade shows, sales meetings, whatever, the first person is not, oh, I'm going to get a magic show.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. They may think comedy, they may think a presenter, they may think, booth personnel handing out t-shirts. I mean, that they, unless they've been to a show where they've seen a magician and saw the reactions that they get, you're just not in their mindset. So you have to educate them first of all. But
Mhm.
this is all stuff that I'm putting together as in course form to be able to get people not to have to go through 50 years of doing this. So we
Yay, sign me up. That's
could
wonderful.
shorten their learning curve by about 49.5 years.
Wow. That's amazing, and that actually brings me to my next question. Right now, there are a lot of people who are like, "I wanna run away with the circus," everyone's got not everyone, many of us were sheltering at home. People are giving a lot of thought to, "What do I wanna be doing? Do I wanna keep doing what I've been doing, Or do I want to make some changes? Because you know what? I'm finding myself happier being at home than I was going to my job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So
Oh,
I
there's a
think,
epiphany going on.
I think so. I think it's global. So, what guidance would you give someone who wants to take that love of magic and move it into a real career? Should they just wait until your course is out, or is there something that they could
No,
do?
I think if anything, and then not again, not just magic, and it's to anything you have. Number one, you better have a passion for, because you're going to be doing this for a long time. So you better love every minute that you're doing this. If it's just something you've picked up because you think, "Oh, I'm going to make a buck out of doing that," it's not going to work, because
Mhm.
you'll never be able to sustain the amount of work it takes to succeed. So if you've already cut your legs off before you've learned to walk, it's ridiculous. You've got to have that passion. And again, that can be everything from slam poetry to juggling ping pong balls on your nose. I mean, whatever. You better bloody well love it,
Right.
because it's just not worth the time or effort. Now, are many skills transferable? Absolutely. Business is business is business. I mean, show business is two words, and business is the longer of the two. It's an old saying, and it still rings true. You have got to know business. You've got to learn the business of show. And that has to do with everything from marketing and how you present yourself and how you package and what the look is and what the style is. And there are a lot of questions to ask yourself, and they are painful.
Mhm.
But if you can't honestly answer them, you'll never, ever succeed. So it starts with a lot of soul searching. And again, we go through a lot of guides to figure out what those things are and because you may think that you like one thing, and you may, after start really looking into it, may have a completely different view of who or what you thought you were going to do. It's like the biggest business question is always, who's your ideal client? If you could write a synopsis of your ideal client, and that means their gender, their age, their occupation, how many kids do they have? Do they have kids? What's their mean average income or not? What are their passions? What are the things that they like to do? What's their hobbies? You have got to literally niche down to that point, or you're not marketing to the right person. You're just marketing like a shotgun, and you'll never get seen. There's too much. There's 7 billion people all looking to do something. So you better be really clear, because I'll tell you, where you think that it's just a tiny little market, when you consider that that tiny little market may be more work than you'll ever do in your entire life, that's enough. It doesn't have to be the giant markets. I'll give you an example. If you were a dog trainer, you could work anywhere in the world. But if you want to really make money as a dog trainer, wouldn't you rather be the expert on um, English beagles that have white spots? You know, I mean, you get down to that point where you become that expert, and that you go to all the forums and the internet on that deal with English beagles with white spots, and you are telling people free information, all the things that you've learned over your vast years on why um, maybe giving them kibbles as opposed to wet food is better, and that the certain proteins create way better oil in their hair to give them a glossier sheen. And to train them, it's way easier to use fish snacks than meat snacks, because their particular olfactory senses. I'm making stuff up, but this is what I'm talking about, is when you can come down and you can be the authority. That's when people learn to know, like, and trust you. And if you can't get that, you can't do anything. And getting to that point takes work. It doesn't happen instantly. You can't say three things and then say, "Oh, hire me because I know all about this stuff." No, they can go anywhere on the internet and find out that you don't know jack. But what you may have done is spend 6 months going through the internet, learning everything you can about that subject, and being that source and font of information and giving it away freely, and to get people to understand that you really do know what the hell you're talking about, and maybe they should listen to you. And that when you do have your, you know, your salmon flavored biscuits, that the reason you want to buy your salmon flavored biscuits is because they give you that perfect code, and that they do help with training, and that they do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but only for beagles that are American, or English rather, and have white spots. It's that's the work it takes.
Sure. And it is that drilled down. And then once you are the expert, once things are moving in that direction, then you can branch out. But you first, I think, have to have the
Yes,
first. You have to be the person who, and it's funny because I keep coming back to this. I am a person who is interested in 45,638 different things all at once.
me too.
And I could be playing the violin, or I could be singing, or I could be meditating, or I could be reading tarot, or I could be teaching kids how to save the earth in South Africa. I could be doing any number of things. And that has stood me in good stead because people come to me for many of those things. But if I want to reach out to people, then I have to have a focus, and that focus has to be razor sharp, or nothing happens, because then they don't know who I am, and they don't have any reason to think that I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, at one point, I ran 5 companies,
Oh,
and none of them were great because I was so split between all the
right.
different passion for all of them. I invented the first ever, T-shirt launchers, which were used, since the '70s to shoot T-shirts and hot dogs and soft gaming product, soft Beanie Babies and stuff out into a crowd for screaming fans in 50,000 seat arenas and stadiums, and they
Wow.
went worldwide. And for there was a great company, but I was also I used a lot of pyrotechnics in my show since the early '70s. So I had a pyrotechnics company called Pyromaniacs FX, and I had 5 people working full time doing pyrotechnic shows, we specialized in indoor shows for everything from rock bands to ballets and theater and that sort of stuff, and we did a lot of indoor film. And so that was happening, and I was doing the magic show, and I was consulting for large scale sporting events with magic, and doing everything. And it was like I was so torn that I was never great at any of them. I mean, individually they were really good and
Hmm.
far better than the average, but I mean, I loved all of them, but what I had to niche down into passion, and then it became two. It was just doing the magic shows and doing the T-shirt and hot dog launching systems. And even though they were running on their own, it was just not. It didn't have the time to do that. So, um, now, I mean, that's still running, but it's on its own. I My concentration is still the corporate shows and the anti-bullying, anti-suicide stuff. So, I've just focused all my energy into that, and I feel so much better, and it's so much easier because I don't have to think of 50 different things. I'm interested in hundreds of it. There isn't anything I'm not interested in. It's crazy, frightening. From logic puzzles to physics and you name it. I just everything fascinates me. But my real time, and the time I focus and set goals for and schedule time for, is the business of magic.
And that is how, in many ways, you have, probably the biggest way that you've reached where you've reached is because you have focused so sharply.
Oh yeah, you. I mean, sometimes you got to do other things to keep the bills going, and then you have to be creative. And that's where a lot of these other companies came from. Time,
Sure.
what it boils down to, what was my happy place? Just performing, just doing shows. That was my passion. And that's what won out over everything else over the years.
And that's wonderful for all of us, but it's not the only thing you do. Like you still have to do no, but let's be honest here. It's not like you said, they don't come to you, you have to go to them. So a lot of that marketing and outreach and public relations and research and all of, do you consider that as part of performing, or is it just the price you pay for being able to perform?
No, no, no. It is show business. It's one package. It's show the magic is only one part of the formula. The
Okay.
entertainment, anything, whatever you do, is only one part of an integrated package. Now, some people are blessed. They get they're great, and they get agents and people's fawning over them, and they've won all these contests, and their money's being thrown at them, and they don't have to worry about the business end of it. They get someone else to do it. That's great. But I will tell you, like being a rock star, it's a very small handful of people that get there.
Mm-hmm.
For the most of us, it is work. Now, could I have had managers and agents and stuff doing it? Sure, and I have. It ended up that I did a better job.
Hmm.
I knew more about it, and I could handle that load. It didn't bother me. Others may not. They will outsource all of these things, and that is fine too. Outsourcing is a wonderful way. If you can outsource your life, and I outsource everything that I don't want to do, especially like I don't cut my grass. Sorry, I don't have time. I don't do my accounting. I have an accountant. I don't, I nowadays I don't even shop. I go online, and my wife does it too. But I mean, it's truly, it's like if I can avoid, if it's not to my goal, I try to eliminate it,
Right.
because in the long run, I'll make more by doing that. First of all, I won't be pulled apart. Now I do the day to day every single day. My day is long because I have so many things I have to look after in day to day. Like we renovated the house. I had to talk to the designers, and we had to work with the painters. We had to get the new floors in, and I couldn't leave that. I'm hands on. I don't micromanage. I've stopped micromanaging.
Honesty. I like that.
I truly, I was bad, because when I was touring, and we would do, oh man, I mean, one tour was 120 shows in 58 days,
Wow.
and we had 22 dancers and crew, and that included a company manager and a tech person, and many technical people, and someone had to run all that. And I had a company manager doing the day-to-day stuff, but there was still so much to be done. I'm a hands-on guy.
Mm-hmm.
I would unload a truck if they'd let me. I did, for years, until they said, no, go do something else. So
Well, sometimes you're better suited for one thing, sometimes you're better suited for something else. I am not well suited for unloading a truck, even though, all of when I'm doing a musical performance, when I've got a gig, I'm a one woman show in that way. All my sound systems, all my instruments, everything goes on a cart and it comes with me. There's nobody that helps. Although, because in part, when they offer, which is very sweet of them, I'm like, you will mess it up. I have a system. So do you have a system for all of the stuff that you do bring when you travel? How do you organize it? How do you put it all together?
you hit the nail on the head. It's all about systems. It's all about having plans. We packed the truck well, I'm not running trucks full of stuff anymore, but when we ran it, there was a floor plan. You followed that like a jigsaw puzzle, because if you didn't, there was one box that didn't get into a truck.
Right.
They were that full. You followed the plan. Now, how did we get there? We practiced. We practiced just like we were practicing an illusion. We would practice loading and unloading a truck to get it right, to have the distribution of the weight right, to have the equipment so it wouldn't crush something else, that we could minimize from 4 trucks to 3 trucks to 1 truck, depending on the show. We never had 4 trucks, but I didn't want to have that. I mean, we were trying to minimize everything we could, but we were carrying lighting, sound, sets, uh, unbelievable, crazy amounts of equipment. But because a lot of it, if we went overseas, we would book the kind of equipment that we would want, but the physical illusions would still have to get over there.
Mm-hmm.
When we got there, we'd have to have a system of which went up first and what lights went up and which rehearsals were going to happen and what time things were going, what the call times were. Everything was systematized, because otherwise you could never get the show up in 6 hours and down in 4 and do a 2-hour show in between. And they were long days.
Yeah.
You do that, and then you were off the next day or day after that. And it was sometimes 2 shows a day in the same location, and off we went. And it's maddening, but you couldn't have done a quarter of that without having systems in place and being organized. And I had other people doing it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I relied on incredible professional people that ran it, but I had to create it first.
Sure. And the thing is, once you have the system in place, the beauty of it is the peace of mind you have because you know you can rely on it.
Yeah.
And there's something so powerful to me in that. And as I get older and as I do more, and during this time of the pandemic, I think to myself, wow, I'm so glad I have my routines. I'm so glad I have my systems in place, and my systems don't change.
Yeah.
If something is happening early in the morning and I know that means I have to get up an hour and a half earlier than I normally would, so then I set the alarm for 4:30 instead of 6 or whatever, and because I have to do those things, and maybe I'm too regimented, but I don't care because it's so important to me. So if you have something in your life like that, what is the most important thing for you to do in any given day?
Well, it starts the night before.
Okay.
I make before I go to bed, I make a to-do list so that I'm not having to think about what I'm going to have to do when I wake up.
Mhm.
And that I used to make these massive to-do lists, which were ridiculous because I could never ever finish. They were, and I was frustrated all the time. And then I said, why don't I just do fewer things? You know?
Ta-da!
Yeah, duh. So I prioritize 3 major things that have got to happen, and then I'll have 2 that could happen, and then 1 or 2 things that, boy, it would be great if I got that done too. And but the 3 have to get done, no matter what. They have to get done.
Mhm.
And now this might be portions of a larger project. Like I might have to uh, learn how to make a fan page in Facebook, as an example.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go to YouTube, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna now I learned how to do it. Now I have to implement it. So after lunch, I'm gonna implement this. I'm gonna make sure I have all the imaging that I need, the photos, the banners. I'm gonna know the pixel sizes that I need. Okay. And then it's done. And it's because it had to get done that day. So I work on that and then I go on to the next one. And then okay, I do that one. And so breaking the tasks down into increments is incredibly important. I used to be way too broad on what I needed to get done, and it never got done.
Mhm.
This time management aspect is so important. Now, having said that, I used to regiment it. Oh, I'm going to do this from 9 till 11. That never works. I'm going to take 20-minute increments and take a 10-minute break. That doesn't work. For me, other people swear by it. There's tons of books written on management and time, and yet you could, all right, you'll find what works for you. Once you find something that works for you, stick to it because it's not going to change. Habits are ingrained. You can change a habit in 21 days, but I will tell you, it's far easier just sticking to something that works. So
Mhm.
long, so long as it works. If it doesn't work, then you're an imbecile for continuing. You know, stupid is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I mean, it's you've got to find something that does work and then stick to that. Now, having said that, things like I had a problem. I had airlines losing my luggage, which had my show in it.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically talking about one-man shows because I did hundreds and hundreds of them. And I could not be without my equipment because I had props.
Sure.
I had two alternatives: either come up with a show that was so propless as to be, fit in my pockets. But there's a problem when you're doing 2,000 people and they can't see the pencil that's in your pocket, even though it's a great trick. But so I had to come up with. So you have different strategies. So the strategy is either having something that uses very few props, which is great. That I long ago got rid of anything that looks like a magic prop because I just didn't like that. I like ordinary things that can do things organically that are amazing. And that could be simply as a clipboard and a magic marker, right? And the things you can do with that, things I can do with it are pretty stunning for recording information and presenting it. So coming up with really interesting stuff that was small was a goal for me because I wanted to be able to pack everything in a carry-on, but still be able to do at least an hour. What ended up happening over the years is I have 3 complete shows, each one for a different a carry-on bag, all that can fit under a seat. Each one is completely different. Each one is complete A material without fluff. And it travels with me everywhere I go. I can fit it with me. It's not going to go underneath. They can't lose it. Only I can lose it for being stupid and leaving it at a restaurant.
Wow.
I tell you this from experience. So at the same time, it then has to be replaceable at like Walmart's or something in 30 minutes so that I can continue on and still be able to do my show. So these are things I had a plan. So I went about, and it took years to find the material that worked on the materials, throwing out stuff. Now, I have a 6,000 square foot warehouse with 60 major illusions and lighting and sound equipment. If we need to do that. I tend not to do as many of those very much anymore because it's not what I want to do. I think I can get just as much excitement and entertainment out of a smaller, what we call suitcase or carry-on shows.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
A clipboard and a pencil. You said that. I love that.
I wish it could just be that, but the idea is that my criteria was to have an hour show, and I can do at least an hour and 20 out of any of my carry-ons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, supplementing those carry-ons are suitcases that can go into the belly of the beast, and that makes, if I can have those, the show's even that much better. But what I'm carrying with me between a laptop and a carry-on suitcase, I can still do a concert show and blow minds.
Mm-hmm.
And but that took will and training and experience and a lot of study.
And that studying is lifelong. I
never stopped. I'm constantly honing and learning new things. No, tricks are tricks are tricks. You get to a point where you know what works for you. I can start working on a trick and go, oh, that's not me. That's not my character. It just doesn't work for me. It's, gone, and I won't waste my time
mm-hmm.
learning it to perfection because I don't need to, because it wasn't me.
Right. It didn't fit.
No, I know what will fit, but that takes thousands of shows,
Mm-hmm.
And I also know if I'm presenting something that I know that I like and I want to do, and it's my character, I know it's going to kill. It may take time to get it to that killer point.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not going to be the first, 110 or maybe even 50 shows, but it will become phenomenal. Like it'll start really good and it'll get great. But that just takes stage time, honing and writing, because half the time the audience writes your show. They'll say something to something that happened to a situation. You go, oh my God, I've got to remember that. It's so funny. That's so good. And that's why I videotape every show, not with really, I don't have to do really super quality stuff. I videotape everything so that if something happens, I can go right back to the tape and go, ah, that was the line. I'm going to use that.
Right.
And little things, those little increments are, again, what separate you from the million wannabes.
It's so true. And it's interesting because video recording everything, it can teach you, but it can also have some unexpected consequences. And that, in my own little story about that, I play a lot on the college circuit when I do my music shows, and I was the host of the open mic for the college every month. I think it was. They would have, no, or was it every Friday? I don't even remember now. But they were having me back to encourage the students to be more creative. That was the whole point, which of course, makes my heart super glad. And I would get the students up to sing, and one woman who was older, it's a community college, she was older and she got up to sing, and she did, and the camera was there and it was recording, and she died in a car accident just a few weeks after that. And so the head of the college contacted me and she said, "Do you have that video recording?" And I checked and the camera had been off.
Oh,
And I was heartbroken. And here is the weird thing. A year later, I happened to look at a video and it had somehow recorded. And I had the video, and I was able to take the
no.
video of her singing, and I created this little, this is back when you sent things on DVD, and I created a DVD of her singing. She sang like 3 songs that night, and we were able to send it to her family in Africa, right?
Wow.
She was Kenyan. So we were able to send it to her family in Africa, and they were gonna be doing a huge, um, memorial service for her. For some reason it happened that it took a long time for them to get it together, and it got there in time, and they were able to play her singing at her memorial service.
Oh, my. That's,
So, it's I tell everybody, record everything. You never know,
I don't know.
you know. So
I've,
so
I've
go
been
ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's absolutely it's so cheap. It's so easy to do right now. I mean, if the you can do it on your phone, you can do it on with a GoCam or even a full Pro from China. You can get a Handycam. You can get pro equipment, whatever.
Right.
Record. Because I mean, I caught myself slouching, and I was my leg the way I was my leg was standing, and I would correct the way my suit was hanging because the microphone was getting in the way, and you start looking and go, oh, that looks terrible, but a minor adjustment the next show, course correction.
Right. And
Uh,
then you can make progress from that point, which
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
is wonderful. So,
It can be.
I hello?
I'm right here.
Oh, I think the podcast gods are telling us that we need to probably wrap up this conversation because we're starting to break up a little. Um, so tell me if you can, uh, do you have a most poignant memory from being on stage?
I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I don't. You'd have to be a little more specific.
Well, something where that I would love to just explore for a second. I'm going to go back to bullying, and this is sort of my own bullying story. I was bullied pretty a lot when I was a kid. An immigrant, funny name, smart kid, blah blah blah. So I got bullied, and as any 12-year-old will do, I vowed my revenge, and and of course never took revenge. But we fast forward to senior year of high school, and I was valedictorian in my high school class, and I was also singing the class song at commencement. And I remember thinking as I stood there singing the theme from Mahogany, which was my which was my class song,
Hmm.
I remember thinking, I wonder what happened to those 3 girls who had bullied me so mercilessly. And then I realized I didn't care. And I was like, I'm accepted into university. I'm valedictorian of my high school class. And I'm standing here singing this really nice song. and doing the singing, which I love more than anything. So revenge was unnecessary. What was necessary was for me to follow my dream and to do it, to do the things that I needed to do. And it felt so right and so good to be on stage and to be singing for people, that moment in many ways has colored my views on relationships. Like, this is important stuff, the idea of pursuing your dream, but it's also important that sometimes our interpersonal relationships don't have, they're not positive, or they're not as positive as we would like. And sometimes you can do something about it and sometimes you can't. But the growth I had in that moment, when I realized that I had never needed to take revenge, that instead all I needed to do was follow the call of the music, and that was going to be the biggest and most important thing. That opened everything up. And it's a weird little poignant moment, but that kind of, in many ways, changed the course of the rest of my life, because it has impacted how I relate to people on a daily basis. So I'm wondering if you have anything like that. What was the thing that you were standing on stage and you go, absolutely, this is exactly where I'm meant to be, because this is the best.
Oh, I can tell you that in 1977, when I ended up in Kenya performing in a casino in Nairobi on my first world tour, and I remember being on stage, and the first thing I remember thinking was, "I won." Because I did what I dreamed of doing,
Absolutely.
and I don't again, didn't know, care if I'd ever see them or, I won. You know, I was in the place I wanted to be. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do, and I had a path that I knew I was gonna follow. And that's very few people are blessed that way. I'm sorry, it just does not happen. They go through life thinking that this is all they got.
Mhm.
They won't take a chance. They won't attempt something. You have got to learn that failure is just a way of getting better at something. And if you're afraid to fail, you can never ever grow. It's impossible. There is no means to progress without failure and constant failure. Because when I'm doing something, I look for every way, as an example for an illusion or a trick that I'm working on. I look for every way it can go wrong.
Hmm.
I want to experience that so when it does happen, I'm ready for it. Or I've eliminated the possibility of it because I said, oh, I need to wear black over this thing because otherwise they're going to see the white thing over here. I've eliminated that. So, and if something does happen, I'm ready. It's not a surprise and a shock. It is business as usual. They would never know that something went horribly wrong.
I
You know,
love that bing went off. That's gonna be, I put a little thing at the beginning of an episode, a little teaser of something you say, and right there, that previous little thing that you said, ending on that bing is gonna be that teaser. I love it.
it's fun.
So and I think that is probably a really good place to end this conversation. This is to say that I would love to have you back, for example, when your course is ready to come out, and if you want to come back and talk about that specifically some more, I would be so honored and delighted to have you back.
Absolutely.
And
Sharing is the way of growth, and I'm happy to do it.
that's wonderful. I appreciate that. And I would love to make sure that people who want to find you, because I'm sure after this you have many new fans, how do people find you on social media?
Brian Glow is on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Soon, there's about 50 old videos on YouTube. There's going to be at least 100 and maybe 300 new ones coming up in the next while, and like on a nonstop basis, where they can actually go and learn some really fun things and be able to utilize it. Um, no downloads needed. You watch it, learn. All we ask is that you practice and make it wonderful. And the website is brianglow.com, which is just getting reconstructed in the next couple of months because I just haven't had time to do it, but
Right.
getting a major upgrade, fortunately.
And then Instagram, you're on Instagram as well?
And because of you, I am pursuing that.
Yay. And that's Illusionist Brian Glow. So you can find Brian on Instagram. Also, you can search on Brian Glow, or you can search on at Illusionist Brian Glow, and you'll find him that way. This has been so wonderful. I so appreciate you making the time, and I know you have an evening to get to, so I will only keep you for just a little bit longer. I would love to find out from you. This is something I ask every guest on the show. If you could skywrite anything, if you had a plane and access to it, and you could skywrite anything in the sky that everybody would see, what would you say?
To be good is not enough if you dream of being great.
Well, I have my marching orders. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. So, again, thank you so much. I will be putting all of these links and all of the information we've talked about in the show notes. And I highly recommend that you find Brian and you get to know this amazing man for the work he does in magic, but also for the work he does in bullying prevention and suicide prevention. It's important, sacred work. Brian, again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much.
This is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Creative Mindset Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the show, leave a review. Let me know what you're thinking. Are there people you think I should be interviewing? I want to know about them because this is about helping all of us live and work more creatively, think more innovatively, and live the lives we're meant to live. I hope that you enjoy the show. Until next time, once again, this is Isolde, and I send you all of my love. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. Today's music was Kevin MacLeod's Ave Marimba, brought to you by Creative Commons License 3.0, and Summer Fashion by Alexander Shamaluev. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.